Good morning, good morning. Today we're going to be talking about aerobic activity and anaerobic activity and what those type of activities are and their definitions. But first, we're going to revisit some of the things we worked on last week. We worked on cardiovascular endurance. Now, we actually did two cardiovascular endurance activities last week. Mr. Sophia, can you give us an example of one of those activities?
We did pacer run.
Very good, the pacer test where you guys ran back and forth.
Right.
Now, how did you feel when you were doing the pacer test?
Feel very sweaty
Okay,
and
good.
tired.
Very good, very sweaty, very tired. Sandra, can you give us an example of the second activity we did that was a cardiovascular endurance activity?
The mile run.
The mile run, very good. Now, how did you feel when you did the mile run last week?
My heart was beating really fast.
Very good, your heart was, increased heart rate. How about your breathing? How were you breathing?
Fast and
Very good, very heavily.
heavily.
So you were using lots of oxygen,
Mhm.
lots of oxygen exchange. Now, this week, we're going to be talking about aerobic and anaerobic activities and how they relate to those activities that we worked on last week. Okay. Now, when we do cardiovascular endurance activities and any other type of intense exercise, there are many benefits to that type of exercise. Okay. Now, we learned last week about the arteries and blood flow and blood circulation and how more activity, more increased cardiovascular endurance activities we do, the clearer our arteries will be. Now, as we eat things like hot Cheetos, which I know we're all familiar with, we all like hot Cheetos, right? Or popcorn, which I'm guilty of as well. I'm going to see Star Wars, so I'm sure I'll be eating some popcorn this weekend. And as we eat things like that, we start to develop plaque inside of our arteries. The more we eat, the more plaque we develop until we get to the point where we have a heart attack or a stroke, and that is here. We want to prevent this. Now, as we exercise, with the increased blood flow, we clear all of that plaque out. Okay, so it's very important that you understand as youngsters that the more you exercise, the unhealthy foods that you are eating, you can combat that now. But as you get older, like I am, and you stop exercising as much, this is where you will be headed. Okay. Now we have a short video I want to show you showing an anaerobic activity. Now I just want you to watch the activity and I want you to watch the behaviors of the people involved in the activity.
Which stands for Progressive Aerobic Cardiovascular Endurance Run, is a multi-stage fitness test. The test is progressive. It is easy at the beginning and gets harder. Set to music, this test is a valid but alternative to the customer resistance run test for measuring aerobic capacity. The pacer is recommended for all ages. The objective.
Okay, now as you watch that video, you'll notice a couple of things about the people participating in the video. Were they using large muscle groups or small muscle groups? Meaning, were they using their arms and legs? Were they walking? Were they crawling? What do you think, Mr. Sophia?
They were running.
They were running. They were using all of their muscle groups.
Correct.
Arms, legs, even some of their heads were moving side to side. Now, anytime you're using all of your muscle groups or your large muscle groups, you are more than likely doing an anaerobic activity. An aerobic activity. An aerobic activity is an activity requiring increased amounts of oxygen. Okay, oxygen being an important word and increased amounts of oxygen being just as important. Now, Mr. Sophia, can you give me an example of an aerobic activity?
Basketball.
Basketball, very good. Now, why do you think basketball would be an aerobic activity?
Because you're running all the time.
You're running all the time. You're using all of your large muscle groups, all of your muscle groups, in fact. Okay, very good. Sandra, can you give us another example of an aerobic activity?
Swimming.
Swimming. Swimming is an excellent aerobic activity. Swimming requires all of the muscles in the body, even muscles in your face. Okay, so swimming is the best cardiovascular or aerobic activity that you can probably do. Mr. Sophia, can you give us another?
Soccer.
Soccer, that is a fantastic aerobic activity. Soccer. Okay, what about you, Sandra?
Tennis.
Tennis, another great aerobic activity. Now, as there are aerobic activities, there are also anaerobic activities. An anaerobic activity is an activity spelling. Even the teacher makes mistakes. Is an activity requiring decreased or less oxygen, okay? Less oxygen. Okay, so the keys there being decreased and amounts of oxygen, okay? Now, if we try to connect both of these types of activities, there are some activities that we will have in common, and some that will be exclusive on either side. Now, these activities here are exclusive to the aerobic side. Who can give me an example of an anaerobic activity? An activity that requires very little oxygen. Sandra.
Texting.
Texting, fantastic anaerobic activity. Mr. Sophia, can you give me another?
Reading.
Reading, another great anaerobic activity. Sandra, another?
Watching TV.
Watching TV, which we are all guilty of. Ms. Sophia?
Weightlifting.
Weightlifting. Now that's a very tricky one. Weightlifting, definitely if I were lifting weights that were small like this would be an anaerobic activity for me because my heart is not beating. I would have to lift this about 200 times in order to get my heart pumping. Now, if I was lifting heavy weights, however, and my heart was beating and I was requiring lots of oxygen, it would become an aerobic activity. So we're gonna put weightlifting right here in the middle. Actually, you know what, let's change the color of that for the ones that we have in common. Okay, who can give me an example of another that you think might fall in between both?
Walking.
Walking. Walking would be a great example of one that falls between both categories. Walking, depending on how fast you're walking, if you're walking at a brisk pace, can be an aerobic activity. If you're walking very slowly, you're casually walking, talking to a friend, it's probably an anaerobic activity. What's another, Sandra, that you think could be in both categories?
Baseball.
Baseball, definitely baseball, because, do you know why in baseball?
Because if you're standing on the field, you're not doing a lot.
Very good, very good. I can tell that you're a baseball fan. So you're standing in the field, you're not doing very much. The pitcher is doing all the work, the batter is doing all the work. You're standing in the field just waiting, just waiting. So baseball can fall in between both, okay? Very good. Now, what I want you to do now is, independently, I'm gonna give you about 3 minutes to write down 5 examples of aerobic activities, hopefully ones that we don't have listed here, and 5 examples of anaerobic activities, hopefully ones that we do not have listed here. And we're gonna compare and contrast our decisions. Very good, very creative, Mr. Sophia. That is definitely one we have not used yet so far. Yes, Sandra, that's one of my favorites. Spelling is not critical in this part of the activity. Do your best. Try to express your thoughts. Express your thoughts. Mhm. Very good. Don't worry about spelling. Do your best to sound out the words. Don't worry, we'll get there. Okay, very good. Mr. Sophia, why don't we have you go first, sir? Can you give us 5 examples of aerobic activity? I'll take them to the board. Thank you, sir. All right. Football, definitely a good aerobic activity, using lots of large muscle groups, okay? Not to be confused with football or soccer here in America. Polo, very interesting. I wasn't expecting to hear polo. Very good. Are you a polo fan?
Yep.
Very cool, very cool. Handball, that is another excellent one. Handball, we all love to play handball, especially when we were in elementary school. We all love to play handball all recess. And water polo as well. So you're a fan of water polo and polo. Very,
Yeah.
very interesting. Water polo, using lots of large muscle groups. Lots of large muscle groups for long periods of time especially. Sandra, how about you? Oh, very good. Another one from elementary school, tetherball. We all miss tetherball. A lot of hand-eye coordination, but lots of cardiovascular endurance happening there. Running, jumping, excuse me, balancing. Dancing, another one. I'm not a very good dancer, but dancing requires lots of oxygen. You're constantly breathing, you're sweating, especially if you're doing it the right way. Karate, very good. Martial arts, very good. Balancing activities and cardiovascular endurance activities. It is definitely aerobic. Boxing. Anytime you look at a boxer, you can always see that they're in fantastic shape, using all their muscle groups all the time, always on balance, tight muscles all the time, lots of breathing, lots of cardio happening. And jumping rope. Jump rope is a fantastic aerobic activity because if you jump rope for 10 minutes, it's the same as exercising hard or running hard for 30 minutes. So if you're someone who doesn't like to give a lot of time to exercise, jump rope will be a fantastic option for you. Mr. Sophia, you have 5 examples of an anaerobic activity for us.
Yes.
Oh, thank you, sir. Golf, an activity I'm trying to become more familiar with myself. Golf. A lot of walking and standing in golf. Very anaerobic. Video games. When we're playing video games, as we try not to play too many video games, it is definitely an anaerobic activity. Not a lot of oxygen happening there, unless you're getting super excited playing a video game. But still, it would remain an anaerobic activity. Driving a car. Driving a car is an interesting one, because if you're casually driving a car, it would probably just be a regular anaerobic activity. Whereas, if you were a NASCAR driver and you're driving for 5 hours, it may be an aerobic activity. Texting, another texting. This is definitely the age of multimedia, and I'm sure many of you are texting right now as we speak, testing how fantastic my class is to all of you.